Good morning. Thanks to all. Oh, y'all can do better than that. Good morning. Our executive budget recommendation, in spite of the last year and a half being a global pandemic, the likes of which we haven't seen in this country since 1918, and in spite of the economic turmoil that that global pandemic has caused, and to a certain extent, some of the policies in Washington has exacerbated, Mississippi is in the best financial shape we've ever been in, and we're in the best fiscal shape we've ever been in. As you have heard me say before, we collected over $1 billion in revenue in the fiscal year that ended June 30th, more than was spent in that particular fiscal year's budget. Through the first 4 months of this year, we're just shy of having collected $400 million more than was originally projected in this fiscal year. And because of that, you've heard me say this before, and I'm going to say it again. If I could only look at one economic stat, and most of you know me well enough to know that I look at a lot of economic stats, given my economics and financial background. But if I could only look at one economic stat on a daily or weekly or monthly or quarterly basis, it would be per capita income. What are we doing to drive per capita incomes up in Mississippi? And we are certainly seeing increases in per capita incomes, and for that we should all be grateful. Now, my fiscal year 2023 EBR, the executive budget recommendation, was released earlier today, and it will serve as a blueprint to make further strides in economic development, economic growth, telemedicine, education, and public safety. Clearly, the EBR is a financial document, but today's release is not only a financial document, it is also a roadmap towards public policy that will continue to drive more economic growth and prosperity in Mississippi. In fiscal year 2023, we will seek to eliminate tax burdens and make a bold move to attract more and better jobs for our people. We will seek to provide better health outcomes for Mississippians. We will seek to expand access to broadband and improve our cities, our parks, our water, and our sewer systems. And we will seek to make our state more sound and more secure. My EBR serves, as I mentioned earlier, not only as a guide for our budget, but as a guide for our broader agenda to rebuild from the disruption that we faced over the last year and a half. Honestly, we find ourselves in a critical point in American history. We must defend our traditional American values, and we must defend Mississippi workers from those forces that seek to disrupt and divide us. As we fight unconstitutional federal mandates in the courts, we are also fighting key battles that get at the core of who we are. We have to ask ourselves, are we going to fight back against the violent crime that in some areas has gone unchecked? Are we going to allow the lie that many children are inherently racist by birth to be taught in our classrooms? Are we going to protect the integrity of our elections? Are we going to help American workers thrive or surrender our prosperity to our global enemies? As the year progresses, we must tackle the important financial and foundational issues before us. We must, as always, spend taxpayer dollars prudently, because after all, these are your dollars. And we must also fight for our way of life before it is too late. And that's why my EBR is focused on these topics. Now, this morning I'm going to highlight a few, not all, but several key proposals included in the recommendation. First, I've spent a lot of time in 2019. I spent a lot of time in 2020. And I've spent a lot of time so far in 2021 talking about investing in our people. Workforce development. My budget recommendation includes $130 million in American Rescue Plan funds to bolster Mississippi's efforts to increase workforce development and skills training opportunities for our residents. We must train Mississippi's workforce for the jobs of the next 50 years, not the jobs of the last 50 years. Under my proposal, the $130 million will be allocated towards Accelerate Mississippi. As you all know, we worked very closely with the legislative leadership to revamp our State Workforce Investment Board to create this entity called Accelerate Mississippi. We will allocate $130 million that will create additional competitive proposal processes with our community colleges and our four-year institutions. It will allow them to facilitate the creation and expansion of programs for high-demand professions that offer above-average wages in industries such as healthcare, cyber, advanced manufacturing, engineering, linemen, fiber installation, and commercial trucking. I've always said that I will do everything in my power to make it easier for Mississippians to provide for their families. And training them for the high-paying jobs of the future is the best way we can do this. Another step we can take to ensure Mississippians are better positioned to provide for their families is to ensure the next generation of Mississippi's leaders are prepared for the careers of the future. We do this by improving educational attainment levels for our citizens. One surefire way to give them the best opportunity to succeed is to have the best, the brightest, in the classroom. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of blue states, Democrat-controlled states, committed to virtual learning. In Mississippi, we insisted on in-person instruction. Day in and day out, our teachers stepped up. They went into the classroom and they helped our kids make tremendous educational gains in many areas. In fact, if you look at our NAEP testing over the last 2 years, in each of those 2 years, 4th grade reading, 4th grade math, 8th grade reading, 8th grade math results, 10-year growth numbers, we outperformed every other state in the nation. I believe that our teachers have made the difference, and I believe that they deserve to be rewarded for their efforts. As I proposed earlier, year in the 2 years following. This $3,300 raise, which the first year will cost approximately $71 million, will result in Mississippi going from 37th nationally to 21st. And it will allow us to go to 4th in the Southeast when adjusted for cost of living. It goes without saying that this pay raise will help Mississippi attract and retain the effective educators our kids need. But simply having the best teachers in the classroom isn't all we must do to ensure that our kids succeed. We need to ensure that they are learning the subjects that will best prepare them for their future careers. We need to ensure that we are teaching them subjects that will improve their problem-solving skills and advance student learning. One such subject is math. There is little doubt that the jobs of the future are requiring more and more math and more computational skills. Having a good grasp on numbers and equations, I believe, is going to be crucial to our students' future success. Math is one area that COVID-19 hit particularly hard. According to the 2020-2021 Mississippi Academic Assessment Program, student proficiency in math actually decreased last year for the first time since 2016. It goes without saying that we must do whatever it takes to prevent this from happening again. That's why I am recommending $3 million to expand the pool of math coaches to support our teachers across Mississippi. Now, the question might be asked, why more math coaches? You see, when I was lieutenant governor, I worked with Governor Bryant and others to pass the legislation which allowed us in fourth grade reading results in our state. This $3 million will help us continue to do the same thing with math. Now, you've heard me talk about the importance of teaching our kids subjects that will improve their problem-solving skills. You heard me mention that more and more jobs are requiring math. Another subject area that certainly hits both marks is computer science. 2020-21 school year saw tremendous growth in the number of schools in Mississippi offering a foundational computer science course. In fact, 65% of Mississippi's public high schools offered such a course, which is an increase of 35% from the previous year. Now, I think that's something we should be proud of, but I also think that I will not be satisfied until we're at 100%. As you know, House Bill 633 passed in the most recent legislative session, and I was signed it into law, and it requires that all schools offer computer science instruction by 2024-2025 school year. And therefore, I believe we must continue our proactive efforts towards full implementation. To achieve this, I am recommending that we fund a dedicated computer science coordinator at the state level to focus on continued implementation and professional development, so teachers are equipped with the necessary skills and resources to effectively teach computer science courses. Teaching computer science courses is important. Effectively teaching computer science courses is even more important. And therefore, I am recommending $2 million to train and prepare our teachers in the field of computer science. Another area of focus in my executive budget recommendation is career technical education. Currently, we only have 194 teachers that are national board certified in CTE, and only 85 school districts in our state has a national board certified CTE teacher. Therefore, we have invested in this budget $400,000 to strengthen workforce readiness through these very important teachers. Now, as you can see, I believe that what we teach our kids is just as important as who teaches our kids. It's absolutely critical to their long-term success. That's why my budget recommendation calls for Mississippi in the coming session to pass legislation preventing critical race theory from being taught in any classroom funded by Mississippi's taxpayers. Critical race theory does not result in improved critical thinking for our kids. Instead, it's a push from radical leftists across the nation to teach our children a lie, that this country is fundamentally racist and that your skin color makes you inherently racist. It is destructive to young children and runs contrary to basic history. It is purely propaganda for a group that with teaching the truth about America's successes and teaching the truth about America's sins. We must not, however, allow the creeping influence of CRT to undermine our children's education. We should be teaching our children about the exceptional good that our country is responsible for. No nation in history has ever done more to advance freedom, to advance prosperity, and to advance fairness. That shouldn't be swept under the rug. It, in fact, should be celebrated. For that reason, I am once again proposing a $3 million investment in a patriotic education fund from capital expense funds. Schools and nonprofits should be able to apply to fund teaching and extracurricular programs that educate the next generation in the incredible accomplishments of the American way. Another cornerstone of the American way is our nation's ability to conduct free and fair elections. Elections have consequences that impact virtually every aspect of our life. We must always do everything we can to ensure that each person voting in our election is legally allowed to do so. That's why I am proposing that Mississippi cleans up our state's voter rolls. To accomplish this, I propose requiring the county registrar or county election commission to distribute confirmation notices to each person on a voter roll in the state of Mississippi. The county election commission shall remove anyone who fails to do one of the following: respond to the confirmation notice, update voter registration information, or vote at least once during a period of 4 consecutive years, which period shall include 2 general federal elections. By implementing my proposals, Mississippi will be a leader in election security and election integrity, and our voters will have confidence in our state's electoral system. And speaking of security, my EBR proposes steps to ensure our residents' safety and security. Unlike some of the blue states and some of the Democrat-controlled cities, the state of Mississippi and our cities and counties back the blue. We recognize just how hard their job is and what they do every single day to keep us safe. The last 18 months have been one of the most difficult times in our nation's history for our law enforcement officers. And there has never been a more important time for us to give them the support and the tools that they need to serve and protect our communities effectively and safely. The fact of the matter is this: we need more police officers. I said this before, and I'll say it again. There are an awful lot of good people that work at the Jackson Police Department. There are good men and women that work at JPD. There are good officers that work at JPD. There just aren't enough of them. To have a successful Mississippi, we need a successful capital city. To have a successful capital city, we must have a safe downtown. For that reason, I am proposing an additional $5.5 million for the Department of Public Safety to double the size of the Capitol Police. We currently have approximately 75 officers in the Capitol Police, and with this additional money, if the legislature agrees, we will double the size to 150 officers for the Capitol Police. Additionally, my budget recommendation calls for $5 million to help attract law enforcement officers from around the country who are making a mass exodus from those more liberal states that perhaps do not support them due to their unsupported policies and politicians. This will not only help our state obtain the much-needed law enforcement residents. To the residents of Mississippi, I am making you this commitment. My administration will do whatever is necessary to keep you and your families safe. Now, I'd like to spend just a few moments discussing the investment in infrastructure that my budget recommendation proposes. First, in the area of water and sewer systems. My budget recommendation calls for allocating $100 million in ARPA funds towards a water and sewer grant program to review, to select, and to fund projects that will have a long-term impact in upgrading this critical infrastructure. Another key infrastructure investment in my budget recommendation is to continue to increase Mississippians' access to broadband. If we want Mississippi to reach its full potential in today's increasingly technological society, our businesses, our rural communities particularly, and our residents need to unlock technology's full potential. Because of this, my EBR includes $200 million in ARPA funds for broadband expansion that will assist Mississippians who are currently not served or who are underserved by their providers. Through this broadband investment, through expanding Mississippians' access to all of the benefits technology has to offer, we're going to help Mississippians reach their full potential. In addition, my EBR also calls for $50 million in capital expense funds to go towards a site development grant program to be administered by the Mississippi Development Authority. Over the last year and a half, I have spent as much time as humanly possible dealing with our economic development community in state and all running operations here in Mississippi and those who are contemplating new capital investments. The thing that I hear over and over and over, and this is not unique to Mississippi, by the way, but the lack of shovel-ready sites is a major hindrance to economic growth and prosperity. It's not unique to Mississippi, I want to be clear. It's true in virtually every state around the country. That's the reason we worked with the legislature to get some funding last year. We appreciate their work, and we are asking for an additional $50 million in capital expense funds to get more sites available. We need more product, as they say. Having fully developed, project-ready sites is paramount to Mississippi's ability to attract and grow businesses and industry. Speed to market is a critical component on the competition. I will just point out also that the Mississippi Development Authority has done a fantastic job over the last year working with our local communities to ensure that we have a searchable and ready to use database so that every site long term that we are investing in that is ready for a capital investment will be easily accessible by the nation's site consultants. Now, I'm excited about the economic development projects that we have announced. It seems like virtually every other day we are announcing new projects, and we're going to continue to see that as companies look to invest in states that have proven over the last year and a half that we are open for business. Which moves me to the last recommendation I'd like to highlight. It's something that you've heard me talk about countless times. It's something that the best way to ensure Mississippi's long-term economic prosperity. That something, of course, is the elimination of Mississippi's individual income tax. If we want to be competitive, we must be capable of pulling out a map of the United States and recognize that Texas is to our west, Florida is to our east, Tennessee is to our north. We compete with them every single day for new jobs. And in every instance, we are at a disadvantage because they don't have an income tax and we do. Therefore, my budget recommendation once again calls for the elimination of the state's income tax. We are proposing in this budget to allocate $1 billion in excess revenue towards eliminating the individual income tax. It will allow us to completely eliminate the 4% bracket immediately in the current fiscal year or in the next fiscal year, and to prevent increasing taxes in other areas, we must couple this tax cut with budget caps. My EBR proposes only increasing the state's general fund budget by no more than 1.5% per fiscal year. Additionally, 50% of the excess revenue then shall go towards the further elimination of the individual income tax, with the goal of eliminating it within 5 years. I've been clear. I am opposed to robbing from Peter to pay Paul. I am opposed to cutting taxes over here but raising your taxes over there. To me, that's not a tax cut. That's a tax swap. And so I want, rather than robbing from Peter to pay Paul, I want both Peter and Paul to get more money in their pocket. And as long as I'm governor, I plan to do everything in my power to lower the overall tax burden on Mississippians. As long as I'm governor, I'm not going to take less from you here, only to take more from you over there. In these trying economic times, Mississippians need more money in their pocket so they can continue to put food on their table. Eliminating the individual income tax is a pay raise for every taxpayer in Mississippi, and it will make it easier for Mississippians to take care of themselves and their families. In addition, I believe that eliminating the income tax will fuel our economy for decades to come. It will make us more competitive. It will allow us to grow jobs, and it will allow us to grow per capita incomes. I look forward to working with the members of the legislature to eliminate the income tax in the coming session. Now, I talked for a pretty good while this morning about highlighting some of the more important things we thought in the recommendation, but I also encourage you to review the entire document, not only the summary, but actual the budget. I used to could get this on a much smaller page, but as I get older, I have a harder time seeing, so they make it big enough where I can read it, which is always good. But look, as you look at the EBR to learn more about not only the specific proposals that I've already discussed, but also others that are in the EBR, I want you to recognize that a couple of the areas that I did not cover include a program to revitalize Mississippi's downtowns, policy recommendations to increase tourism, to improve our state parks, to expand access to telemedicine, to implement a next-generation 911 dispatch infrastructure, to restore what was lost because of the pandemic, and also proposals on how we can continue to improve Mississippi's correctional system. As always, it's my great honor to serve this wonderful state as our 65th governor, and I look forward to working with members of the legislature to implement these bold plans, and I also look forward to working with the people of our state to ensure that Mississippi is an even better place to invest capital, an even better place to create jobs, and an even better place to raise a family. So with that, thank you all for being here, and I'll open it up to a few questions. Yes, ma'am.
Governor, is there any evidence that critical race theory is being taught in Mississippi schools now?
I think that it is critically important. We'll let her telephone answer your question. No, I think it's critically important that we ensure that we prevent critical race theory from being taught in our schools. Clearly, there is we tend to give each individual school district flexibility, and typically that's a good thing. But in this instance, I think it's critically important that we say from the state, from the legislature, that we pass a law. Because while I have made it clear to those who are on the board of the State Department of Education, I think it is important that we pass a law, that we outlaw the teaching of CRT in our classrooms, And I encourage the legislature to do that. Send it to me, and I will sign it very, very quickly.
Governor
Scott.
Governor, back to the income tax proposal. Many members of the GOP were reluctant to go forward with this proposal last year. What ground has been made up in trying to convince these lawmakers that this won't bankrupt the state or put us in bad standing?
Well, I will tell you, Scott, I'm not sure that there are a lot of members of the Republican Party that are going to stand up and say they're not for eliminating the income tax. We're really having conversations around what is the best way in which to do it. I have a proposal that I think makes the most sense. It allows for the complete elimination of the income tax. For those who, even for those on the other side of the aisle, though, the Democrats who may be opposed to eliminating the income tax, I'll just point towards the absolute fact that many of those same people were making exactly the same arguments when we proposed the Taxpayer Pay Raise Act back in 2015. That was the largest tax cut in Mississippi history. It was a $480 million tax cut, and many of the same folks on the left said, you can't do this. If you pass this major tax cut, you're going to see significant reductions in revenue. Well, that is not at all what has happened. In fact, we now are dealing with a scenario in which during the last fiscal year, we actually collected $1 billion more in revenue than was projected. We're seeing record economic growth. We're seeing record revenue growth. And I would argue that the best way for us to continue that is to let more Mississippians keep more of their money. Bobby.
On the tax cut, Governor, could you explain in more detail? I think you said $1 billion and use $1 billion in existing growth. Explain that.
So
I can understand.
obviously, as I mentioned, fiscal year, approximately $100 million a month more in revenues than was projected. And so what I think we ought to do is we ought to use that recurring revenue, and rather than, and there will be those in the legislature that want to spend it. I understand that. And this is, I'm talking about future revenues. There'll be those who want to spend it because there's always a constituency for spending more money on this governmental entity or more money on this governmental entity. What I think we ought to do is we ought to take $1 billion of that $1,160 or $70 million that we collected last year that it appears that we're going to collect again this year. You know, that makes it recurring, and we ought to let individuals keep more of their hard-earned money. Yes, ma'am.
Can you explain how much of that, if any of that, even though you call it recurring, would be a part of the federal relief, COVID federal relief?
None of this is all that we collected more in state revenue because of some of these programs that the federal government enacted, and perhaps there is some small percentage of it that comes to that. But in terms of the $1 billion that I'm saying use immediately, it is all monies that is collected at the state level in the state general fund. There will be an appetite by some in the legislature to spend it, to spend that recurring revenue on recurring expenditures long term. What I am proposing is to not spend it on additional government programs, with the exception, of course, of the teacher pay raise that I mentioned earlier. This would allow us to really get a huge jump start on the complete elimination, and under our plan, it gives us the ability to fully eliminate the income tax, or certainly have a goal of fully implementing it within 5 years. But I'll tell you, I'm not married to the 5-year goal. I think implementation, it's something that I'm willing to consider as well. But we need to pass legislation this year which creates a path towards the full elimination of the income tax so that we can be more competitive with states like Florida and Texas and Tennessee. I spent a lot of time in the last few months up in DeSoto County and Marshall County because we've had a lot of big economic wins up there. And we find ourselves and by the way, this is not unique to the last couple of months, but this has been happening for a long time. In fact, if you look at the 2020 census, I think what you're ultimately going to find is that two areas of our state, the Mississippi Gulf Coast, the three coastal counties, and then that Marshall County, DeSoto County area, saw significant population growth between 2010 and 2020. And basically everywhere else saw a little bit of movement here and there, but not a lot of population growth or population loss during that time frame. And when you talk to the economic developers up there, you talk to the business leaders up there, they truly believe that our population growth would be significantly more if we weren't competing literally across the state line with a state that had no income tax. I think that's true when you go to places like Bay St. Louis, for instance. The housing market in Bay St. Louis today is probably hotter than it's ever been. It may be the hottest housing market that Mississippi's ever had. And if you talk to people in that area, and you talk to small business owners, and you talk to the leaders in that community, and quite frankly, if you talk to people with capital in places like New Orleans, if we were able to eliminate the income tax, I think that growth would be even bigger and even better, and we'd see even more population growth. And so, y'all have heard me say it before, and I'm going to say it again. I believe strongly that the infrastructure that we have in place, the momentum that we have as a state, can carry us to very strong GDP growth numbers, 2.5%, 3%, maybe even more, 3.5% GDP growth over a long period of time. But if we want to see real transformational economic growth, 4.5%, 5%, it's going to require population growth. From 2013 to 2019, in every single one of those years, we actually saw population declines in Mississippi. That's not something that we should be proud of, but it's a fact, and it's something that we should recognize and be willing to not try to hide it, but find ways to fix it. And 2020, of course, I'm proud to say, was the first year since 2012 that we actually saw year-over-year population growth. I think that trend can continue with our investments in infrastructure, with our investments in broadband, with our investments in quality and improved educational attainment levels in our students. I think that can improve with continued investments in workforce development and workforce training. That's attracting more people here. But I think it also would help greatly if we put ourselves on a level field of competition with Texas, Florida, and Tennessee by eliminating the income tax. Yes, sir.
Governor, you just mentioned investments in infrastructure. I think earlier, correct me if I'm wrong, you said you're proposing to set aside $100 million in ARPA funds for water and sewer projects across the state. But then in a city like Jackson, Jackson's leaders have said they need at least $2 billion to fix their issues with the water and sewer system. I mean, do you feel like $100 million is actually appropriate? I know Jackson's just kind of a microcosm of a lot of rural systems in the state too.
Sure. Yeah. So what I would say is a couple things. First of all, in our plan, we allocated $1.2 billion in ARPA funds. So we left an additional $500 or $600 million that is not allocated. I know I've spoken multiple times with Lieutenant Governor Hoseman. I know he's worked really hard on developing some of the same concepts and some additional ones. And I think he's got some good ideas as well. But we do in this plan have an additional $500 or $600 million. Here's what I think is really important. The cities and counties, we received about $1.8 billion. The cities and counties received $800 million. I think it's very important that our cities and counties spend those monies on infrastructure, on water, sewer, roads, bridges, and or law enforcement. That, to me, is where they need to spend those monies. As you mentioned, the city of Jackson. The city of Jackson got about $45 million in ARPA funds, and Hinds County got about $42 million, or it may have been 40. It may have been the other way around, but it's about $87 million. And so I think it's really important that if they really do believe that their priority is the water and sewer system, and I think it should be, that they invest their local money, and I think we as a state should be prepared to reward those entities that spend their money on areas that are critically important. Because if you don't, then your cries out for help will probably go unanswered. If you don't spend the money that you have available towards prioritizing these infrastructure needs, then we certainly will. So the other thing that I'll just mention, if you look at some of the areas in which we invested in our plan, ARPA funds, an additional replenishing of the unemployment trust fund so as to keep small business taxes low is another area. We also invested in ARPA funds $200 million to shore up the state health insurance program. We cut every agency. We started with a 1% cut for every state agency. We believe that governmental entities can always get more efficient. And so we cut every agency 1%, and then we added back money from there in places like corrections where we knew that we needed it. And so there are certainly conversations that can be had about increasing that infrastructure investment, and I think that's something that we need to do. The other thing that I will just mention, I think Lieutenant Governor Hosemann has said this, and to me personally, I think he said it publicly as well numerous times, and that is there's a joint goal to spend these ARPA monies on projects that can be not only transformational but can solve generational challenges. Because we're probably not going to have $1.8 billion available anytime in the near future, because at some point the federal government's ability to borrow money is going to be significantly threatened, particularly if they keep borrowing at the pace that the Biden administration is borrowing. And so I think it's important to focus on those projects. When you take the $1.8 billion in ARPA and the approximately a little over $1 billion, a good bit over $1 billion in Mississippi state reserve funds, there's between $3 and $3.5 billion available that we can spend on those type projects, transformational, generational projects, and I think that's what we should do. I know there's been a little bit of a push from some that, oh my gosh, we got to hurry up. If you're solving problems that need to be fixed and have needed to be fixed for 10, 20, 30 we certainly need to be smart about the way we do it, but as I've said oftentimes, I'd rather get it right than get it done quick.
Talk about the impact of having it available as you figured out this recommendation, and why you felt like 1.2 out of that 1.8 should go ahead and be dedicated in this fiscal year.
Well, I felt like it was important to highlight some of our priorities when we're putting out the executive budget recommendation. We could have made the decision to just simply unveil a full program for the $1.8 billion, but we wanted to go ahead and put this $1.2 billion in. I think you'll probably, over the next 45 to 50 days, see additional plans that we propose before the legislative session. Obviously, they come back in on January 4th, and at that point, we'll work very closely with them to make sure that we focus on spending these monies on really good projects that have the chance for transformational change.
Those 1.2 billion highlighted in your budget?
They are.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, they sure are.
Governor, could you go back to the police recruiting fund of $5 million? How would that work? How would somebody use that cash to bring Officer Friendly in from Dallas?
You know, we're going to work with the legislature to get final details. but I think things such as signing bonuses. You can go to McDonald's now, and in some areas of this country, get a $500 or $1,000 or a $1,500 signing bonus just to start work at McDonald's. I think an example of the ways we could use that $5 million is to help, certainly at the state level. I'm 100% for allowing this to happen at the state level, where we recruit officers and perhaps use some of that money as a signing bonus. I'm perfectly comfortable with working with our local jurisdictions, and where they bring new people onto the police force, where we can potentially provide signing bonuses for them as well. It may be, you've got some things in some pilot programs. Like last night, I was in Natchez for the unveiling of the new Hallmark movie that was made down there. It was incredible, by the way. Ely and I really had a great time. Literally thousands of people on the bluff there in Natchez watching the sunset and then watching an hour-and-a-half Hallmark movie. Wow, what a great time that was. And they're really building an industry down there. And for that, I'm very thankful. We've seen at least 2 new businesses locate in downtown Natchez in the last 2 years. That combined with the what's going on from an economic standpoint there is really exciting. But one of the things that Natchez is looking at is a bit of a pilot program. They're doing it themselves. Is are they able to provide for people to move there to help incentivize individuals to move? Because we know that people are moving out of big cities. We know that COVID proved that for a lot of people, it's just really not that fun to live in New York City or that fun to live in Washington, D.C. Part of it is because of the anti-business policies that their leaders have in place. Part of it is some of the crime that's happening in larger cities across America. And some of it is just it's easier to work from remote locations now. Because in a lot of instances, we proved that there are a lot of jobs that you don't have to be in the office 8 or 9 or 10 hours a day, 5 or 6 days a week. And so that ability to locate remotely and work in jobs that, by the way, pay a lot of money, that will help us drive that per capita income is one way in which to do that.
Is that $5 million ARPA funds?
That is actually... Yes, it is in ARPA funds. It's part of the $1.2 billion plan. Yes, ma'am.
Hunter Dawkins from the Gazebo.
At this, I apologize. I was in a structure fire earlier in Pasco, but everybody's okay. One of the recommendations that you were making was ensuring election integrity. Now I know your relationship with Secretary Watson back in the legislature. Have you discussed what's going to entail these? At least, are y'all working together, or are you separate on your recommendations? Just if you wouldn't mind, Governor.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm glad to hear everybody's safe from the structure fire. But what I would say is many of these proposals were proposals that we worked on in the legislative session last year. Some of them actually passed one chamber or the other. They tended to get tied up in as is often the case, in infighting amongst the chambers. But I'm confident that anyone who is for election integrity can get on board with these common sense proposals to make sure that we clean up our voter rolls.
As a really quick follow-up to that, is there any reason to believe that Mississippi's elections haven't been, or that their integrity's been compromised?
I think if you look at the statewide elections, that there's certainly reasons to believe that in small pockets, none of which have had an impact on the outcome of a statewide election, but there are certainly small pockets in certain elections where there have been election integrity issues. But you don't have to really believe me if you don't want to. You can just go to the courts and see people like Ike Brown having been indicted and convicted of election fraud issues. People in the Hattiesburg case, certainly what's happened recently in Canton and what's happened before that. And so, again, we ought to make sure that we make it easy to vote and hard to cheat. And there are instances right here in our state where individuals have cheated, but they have there are those instances where they have also been caught, and they should have. So, yes, ma'am.
On the Capitol Police issue,
Mm-hmm.
that's just for downtown, correct?
Well, it's for the Capitol Complex Improvement District, which is the area that was created by legislation some years ago. It basically goes from Jackson State to the interstate all the way up to Meadowbrook and east over to where the institutions of higher learning, the community college board, those office spaces that we own there, by we I mean you, the taxpayers, the state owns, they're at the corner of Lakeland Drive and Ridgewood Road. So it includes the University of Mississippi Medical Center, for instance. It includes certainly the downtown. It includes Jackson State. It includes parts of Fondren as well. It includes all of Belhaven, for instance. And so, I mean, and the other point that I would just make is one of our largest investments in the ARPA funds is in the NG 911 plan. This is a topic that we've been talking about in Mississippi for a long time. And one of the things that we have found, and it's been proven as a challenge, certainly in some of the crimes that have been committed in downtown Jackson, is when you call 911, you need someone to answer. You need somebody to answer quickly. We've got a lot of challenges in our 911 system from a technology standpoint. We got a lot of challenges from a funding standpoint. It's a tough nut to crack. We've been trying to do it as a state for many years, and that's why I proposed a $300 million investment. Because if you are subject to a crime, and either you or your neighbor or your friend reaches out to 911, we got to make sure somebody answers that call, and we got to make sure that law enforcement gets there quickly.
Well, the other part of my question was, which I didn't get to, because I was saying the downtown area for the Capitol Police. Is there anything you can do for the rest of Jackson? Because we heard 2 detectives just resign, and you know the state of the police department in our capital city at this point.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly need our city leadership to invest in the Jackson Police Department. We need them to recognize how important the Jackson Police Department is to keeping crime to a minimum, and I think that that's something that is critically important. And we need a good partnership with the city. We need the city and the city leadership. We need the members of the city council. When they pass a budget, they need to increase funding. They don't need to defund the police. They need to increase funding for the police. Or as we like to say, we don't need to defund the police. We need to refund the police, and we need to re-up how much we're spending. We need the county. We need a great part of the county. We need the county to add officers. Hines SO is critically important to this. And so I think we all have to make a commitment to invest more of our limited funds in protecting our communities, and that's true of the county, that's true of the city, and what I'm proposing is I think it's true of the state, and I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is, and I hope the members of the city council, the mayor's office, and the board of supervisors in Hinds County agree with that. Yes, ma'am.
For the money for the Capitol Police, that is Department of Public Safety. That's under them. And you mentioned the importance of doing that to curb violent crime in Jackson. Another of area under DPS that's been really impacted by the increase in violent crime is the medical examiner's office and the state crime lab. Are you proposing any increases for staffing there, or anything that could help them deal with that influx of violent crime?
That is a great question. That's, one of the things that when I asked Commissioner Tyndall was the outrageous wait times at our driver's license services. We worked with the legislature to pass legislation. We got additional monies, and we have been innovative in creating an online appointment system. And I think most all of us would agree that is one area in which we have fixed the problems at DPS. The crime lab, we literally inherited a crime lab that was significantly further behind than is even reasonable, and we have been working to eliminate that backlog. We have hired additional medical examiners. We hired Commissioner Tyndall, Senator Wiggins, and I have been working on, for instance, getting a new medical examiner for the Mississippi Gulf Coast for as long as I can remember. We've actually hired one now, so we have an ME on the coast. We've just recently come to terms with an additional medical examiner that should be moving to Mississippi very soon, and we're going to continue to work to find ways. The biggest the backlog that we inherited is our biggest challenge to overcome at the ME's office. We're going to constantly be looking to hire additional people. We've looked at everything from, how do we contract out, and we've been successful at contracting out some employees, particularly those that work at the University of Mississippi Medical Center, to come in and help us. So we're making progress there, but we also recognize that we have not got that issue solved yet. We're going to continue to work on it. So, one more question. Yes, ma'am.
The EPA administrator is touring Jackson today. Do you plan to meet up with him? How come you're not on the tour?
Yeah, I don't have any intention of meeting with the EPA administrator today. Thank you all very much for being here. We appreciate it. And if you have any follow-up questions, I'm sure Bailey would love to hear from you. So thank you all very much.